nestled deep in the evergreen corners of Washington State, the small town of Maple Hollow moved at a quiet, unhurried pace. Life there was simple, peaceful in a way that made time feel like it stretched just a little longer than elsewhere. In a cozy cottage near the edge of the forest lived Daniel Moore, the town's gentle librarian, and his 10-year-old daughter, Leah. Daniel had raised Leela alone since the day she was born. Her mother, Emma, had passed away during childbirth, leaving behind only a fading photograph and a warm memory in Daniel's heart. The years hadn't been easy, but the bond between father and daughter had grown strong, rooted in love, nurtured through books, bedtime stories, and countless shared walks along the wooded trails behind their home. By their side always, trotting faithfully, was Buddy, a senior German shepherd who had been Daniel's companion long before Leah could walk. Though his muzzle was graying and his steps slower now, Buddy still carried the same quiet loyalty he always had. Most afternoons, after the last library visitor had left, and the sun began to dip beneath the hills, Daniel, Leah, and Buddy would venture into the forest together. It had become their ritual, just the three of them, wandering beneath the trees, listening to the wind whisper through the branches. Those walks were more than routine. They were a thread that held their little world together. And one summer evening, everything began to change. It was a warm evening in late July, the kind where the golden light lingers just a little longer before giving way to dusk. The forest behind Maple Hollow was bathed in soft amber, and the trail beneath Daniel, Leah, and Buddy crunched gently with every step. Leah skipped ahead, her long braid bouncing against her back as she hummed a tune from one of her favorite storybooks. Buddy padded closely behind her, his ears twitching at every distant sound. Daniel walked a few steps behind, taking it all. The way the breeze rustled the leaves, the smell of pine and wild flowers, and the echo of his daughter's laughter weaving through the tree. They followed the same trail they'd taken 100 times before, one that curled past old maple trunks in a small mossy stream. But that evening, something felt different. Buddy stopped abruptly, his body stiffened, nose high in the air, tail straight. His instincts, though dulled with age, had never truly faded. He let out a low rumbling growl, not of aggression, but of alert. Leah turned back. "Buddy, what is it, boy?" Before Daniel could respond, Buddy darted off the path and into a thick patch of underbrush. "Stay close to me," Daniel said gently, placing a hand on Ela's shoulder as they carefully followed the shepherd into the dense greenery. They pushed past ferns and brambles until they found Buddy standing over something small and motionless, hidden among the roots of a tree. Leah knelt down, her voice barely a whisper. "Daddy, it's a baby." Nestled into the earth was a tiny creature, covered in soft black fur, shivering and silent. Its eyes were shut tight, and its body trembled as if it hadn't known warmth in days. And just like that, their quiet world shifted. Daniel gently scooped the small creature into his hands. It barely weighed anything, its body no larger than a mug, bones delicate, fur soft and damp from the forest floor. Leah leaned in close, eyes wide with concern and wonder. "What is it?" she whispered. Daniel shook his head. "I'm not sure, but it's cold. We can't leave it here." They wrapped it in Leela's flannel jacket, and Daniel tucked it gently into the inner pocket of his own coat. The walk back home was quiet. Even Buddy trotted softly, casting backward glances at the mysterious bundle as if guarding it. Back at their cottage, Leia sprang into action. She pulled out a shoebox, lined it with an old knitted scarf, and placed a small hot water bottle inside. The creature barely stirred as she set it down. They didn't know what to feed it, or how old it was. Daniel searched the internet for answers while Leia held a dropper filled with warm goat milk, coaxing the animal to take tiny sips. Its mouth was so small, its movements so slow, it felt like caring for something from another world. What should we name it? Ela asked softly. Daniel hesitated, but Leia answered for them both. Shadow, because it came from the woods like a whisper. Daniel smiled. Shadow it is. That night, no one slept much. Every couple of hours, Leia and Daniel took turns feeding and checking on Shadow. Buddy lay beside the box, his head resting on his paws, eyes watchful and still. Leia stayed beside Shadow for hours, gently whispering stories to it, like a little sibling. Her fingers brushed its fur as if afraid it might vanish. Daniel watched her and for a fleeting moment saw a reflection of the past, the same fragile helplessness, the same quiet hope that filled the room the night Leia was born. Shadow's tiny breath felt like a second chance at something they'd almost lost. The days that followed took on a rhythm neither Daniel nor Leia had expected. Their lives, once quiet and predictable, began to revolve around the tiniest creature they had ever cared for. Daniel had taken a few days off from the library, just enough to get Shadow through what he thought would be a rough start. He searched endlessly through books and online forums, trying to figure out what kind of animal they had brought home. With its soft black fur, floppy little limbs, and nearly silent whimpers, it wasn't hard for Daniel to assume it was just a newborn puppy, abandoned, lost, perhaps from a stray mother. Looks like some kind of shepherd mix, he muttered. One evening, studying Shadow's small snout as it rested in the crook of Leia's arm. Maybe German or Belgian. Leia nodded, though she seemed less interested in what Shadow was and more focused on who he was becoming. She had taken on her new role with surprising tenderness and instinct. She set her alarm every 2 hours, carefully warming the bottle and holding Shadow close as he fed. Between each feeding, she whispered little songs, invented stories, and gave him gentle names like Midnight Mouse and Forest Baby. Daniel watched her with a heart both proud and aching. She had always been strong. Life had made sure of that. But this was something different. It was healing in a way neither of them had expected. Buddy, too, had begun to warm to their strange new guest. Though cautious at first, he often lay beside the shoe box like a silent guardian, his old eyes blinking slowly as he watched over the growing bond between the little creature and the little girl. Day by day, Shadow grew stronger. His eyes remained closed, but his tiny limbs moved more with each passing hour. Was still too early to tell what he truly was, but to Leela and Daniel he was already something more than a pet. He was family. As the days passed, Shadow began to grow, but not in the way Daniel had expected. By the end of the second week, his eyes had opened, revealing glimmering dark pupils that seemed almost too alert for a baby. His Limbs grew lean, his movements agile and precise. What Daniel once assumed to be the clumsy coordination of a newborn turned out to be something else entirely. Refined instinctive motion that hinted at a different kind of intelligence. It started with small things. Shadow would wriggle out of Ela's hands and vanish beneath the furniture, through spaces Daniel thought were far too narrow for anything to fit. Then came the climbing. One morning, they found him curled atop the bookshelf, fast asleep next to a dusty globe. There was no way he could have jumped that high. And yet, there he was. Leela was delighted. He's like a ninja, she laughed, watching as Shadow scaled the leg of a chair without a sound. But Daniel grew thoughtful. He knelt beside Shadow one evening, watching as the creature tilted its head toward a faint scratching sound coming from outside the window. His ears twitched, not like a puppy's, but sharper, more attuned, and his snout, now more defined, had grown narrower and longer than Daniel remembered. "This isn't a dog," he murmured under his breath. But Leia only smiled and hugged Shadow tighter. "I don't care what he is, he's ours." Daniel tried to laugh with her, but something inside him stirred. There was something too precise, too wild in the way Shadow moved, more forest than fireplace. Still, when Leia curled up on the couch with Shadow on her chest and Buddy at her feet, it was hard to imagine their home without him. Strange or not, Shadow belonged. For now that was enough. The questions grew louder. With each passing day, Shadow had now become fully mobile, darting around the living room with uncanny speed, squeezing between cabinet doors and vanishing into impossible corners. He preferred to sleep during the day, curled up in dark spaces, and was most active after sundown. His sense of hearing was razor sharp. He could detect the buzz of a fly before it even landed, and his nose, it twitched constantly as though reading stories in the air no one else could sense. Daniel's curiosity soon turned into concern. "This doesn't add up," he said one evening, standing over his laptop as Leia played with Shadow on the floor. His behavior, his proportions, even his sleep patterns, they're just not canine. Leia looked. "So what is he then?" Daniel hesitated. "I don't know. That's what scares me." He called the old vet in town, Dr. Henley, who agreed to take a look. The next morning, Daniel and Leia wrapped Shadow in a soft towel and drove to the clinic. Dr. Henley examined him carefully, checking his teeth, paws, ears, tail before stepping back with a puzzled frown. "He's healthy," the vet said slowly, "but I can't say for sure what he is. His build is unusual, possibly some kind of exotic ferret or wild hybrid. I've honestly never seen anything quite like him." On the ride home, Leia sat quietly, Shadow curled in her lap. Her fingers stroked his fur absently. "Do you think someone will try to take him away?" she asked. Daniel gripped the wheel a little tighter. "No one's taking him from us, sweetheart. We'll figure this out together." Leia's voice dropped to a whisper. "He's part of us now. Like the piece we didn't know was missing. If they try to take him, I don't think I could let go." Daniel glanced at her in the rearview mirror, heart tightening. He saw it in her eyes, the same fear he'd once felt when she was born. That Fear of losing something you've only just begun to love. And deep down he knew the mystery was only just beginning. Autumn crept into Maple Hollow. Quietly, the forest behind Daniel's cottage turned to gold and rust, and, with each passing week, Shadow grew not just in size, but in ability. He moved with astonishing grace, darting, climbing, squeezing through spaces even Buddy had given up on years ago. Night, Daniel sometimes caught him, perched silently on the windowsill, staring out into the woods with eyes that glinted like onyx stones in the moonlight. Then came the afternoon that changed everything. They were out, walking, Daniel, Leia, Buddy, and Shadow, wandering deeper into the forest than usual. Leia was collecting leaves for a school project when a rustle in the grass caught their attention. Small family of wild rabbits grazed peacefully in a clearing up ahead. Buddy, as expected, gave a half-hearted bark, but didn't chase. He was too old for games now. But Shadow's reaction was different. He dropped low to the ground, body completely still, tail twitching. Just once. Then, with a silent, measured crawl, he began to stalk the rabbits, each movement eerily precise, as if programmed by nature itself. Leia held her breath. "Daddy, look." Just as Shadow was about to pounce, Daniel called out sharply, "Shadow, no." Instantly, Shadow stopped. His body froze mid-step, and after a moment of hesitation, he turned and padded back toward them. But in his eyes, Daniel saw something wild, something ancient and untamed. That night, he sent videos and photos of Shadow's behavior to a wildlife center in Seattle. Days later, the reply came. Shadow was most likely a rare melanistic ferret, possibly a hybrid from a wild strain long thought extinct in the region. The answer didn't settle Daniel's nerves, but it explained the instinct in Shadow's bones. And yet, the more they learned about him, the more they realized he wasn't just a rare animal. He was extraordinary. A few days after the Wildlife Center responded, a second email arrived, this time from the zoological division of a major city zoo. It was polite, professional, and carried the weight of quiet authority. "We are very interested in examining the animal more closely." It read, "We'd be grateful if you allowed us to conduct short-term behavioral and genetic evaluations at our facility. This would be done under the care of our veterinary specialists." It wasn't a demand, but it was more than curiosity. Daniel could feel the pressure between the lines. He sat with the message open for nearly an hour, rereading it as Shadow curled up beside Leia, who was gently humming while threading tiny daisies into the creature's soft black fur. Later that night, when the house was still, Daniel finally brought it up. "Leela," he said, softly, sitting beside her at the edge of her bed. "There's a zoo in the city. They saw Shadow's pictures and videos, and they want to study him just for a little while." Leela didn't speak at first. Her hand rested on Shadow's back, fingers moving slowly, as if committing the feel of his fur to memory. "Available to make it that way?" she asked. "Only for observation?" They said they'd care for him, probably bring him back. She looked up at her father. Her eyes were wet, but she wasn't crying yet. "Dad," she whispered, "don't care if he's not a dog or if he's not what people expect. He's mine. He's Ours. When Mom died, I didn't get to say goodbye. I didn't get to hold on to anything but Shadow. I found him. I love him. I don't want to lose someone I love again. Daniel's heart broke open in silence. He pulled her into his arms, pressing his cheek to her hair. We're not sending him anywhere, he said quietly. He stays with us where he belongs. And in that small room under a soft yellow lamp, surrounded by silence, love, and the quiet breathing of something once lost but now found, Daniel realized some bonds are too sacred to explain. Some families aren't made by blood. They're made by choosing to stay. Autumn deepened in Maple Hollow, brushing the trees with fire and gold. In the quiet corners of their cottage, change had settled in. Not loud or sudden, but steady and soft, like the way sunlight slips through a window at dawn. Shadow had become more than just a part of the household. He had become the soul of it. Each morning, he'd scurry around the living room while Daniel sipped his coffee and Leia packed her backpack for school. He'd follow her to the door and wait by it until she returned. In the evenings, he'd curl into her lap as she did homework or read aloud, his small body rising and falling with the rhythm of her voice. At the library, Daniel built Shadow a little corner nest near his desk. It started as a joke, but when patrons began asking for the library helper, it became part of their charm. Shadow, surprisingly focused, would fetch dropped pencils, nuzzle anxious kids, and sometimes sit perched beside Leia during story time, like a furry guardian of words. And Leia, she changed too. Her laughter came easier. Her drawings filled entire notebooks. She spoke with more confidence, shared her thoughts with spark. She even began writing short stories about a shadow creature from the forest who found a girl with a broken heart and stitched it back together with love. One Saturday afternoon, Daniel watched them playing in the backyard. Leia racing across fallen leaves with Buddy barking and Shadow darting after her like a streak of living dusk. He stood there still for a moment, overwhelmed by a peace he hadn't felt in years. Life had taken a lot from them, but it had also given back quietly in its own time, in its own way. And as the last leaves danced to the ground, Daniel realized something. They didn't need to understand everything to feel whole. They just needed each other. And for the first time in a long time, the next chapter didn't feel so scary. It felt like coming